Well, this club has changed a lot in the time that I've been coming here. This stage used to be really small. I mean, this was the edge of the stage here. And it had a balcony, but it didn't have a bar there. It had tables like you would a family-style restaurant or something. It was like long tables. And it had a little sound booth. That sound booth was a tiny little window up there. There was no dressing room up there, no stairs there. And people went on and off the stage, well, I think a couple different ways. But it was an amazing place, an amazing time, because at the same time, it was a really important showcase for artists that were about to become huge, or just, they would, like Elton John played here before anybody knew who he was. And it wasn't that it was timed, for him to play one gig here, and then from then on he would play the Forum. And so it was very exciting. So if you saw someone like Waylon Jennings here, it was an attempt to get an intimate show for an audience of, a showcase, for an audience of fans and writers, and get an up-close look. But the rest of the time, it was a folk club, and there were people who played here, all week long. And, 2 shows, Tuesday through Thursday, and 3 shows on Friday and Saturday. And, I saw Chris Christopherson here. I opened for Linda Ronstadt. I saw Elton John's show. I saw James Taylor's show. I saw Joni Mitchell. I saw Laura Nyro, and she was unbelievable. Laura Nyro was like, she just occupied this place in such a regal fashion. First place, she dressed like nobody else. She dressed in these long dresses, and she'd do a song, and our audience was crazy about her, and they would just cheer her, and she'd do a song, and she'd get up after each song and, walk the length of the stage, and then go back and sit behind the piano, and every song was a moment that she composed herself for, and then deliver this incredible song. I can't tell you how many songs, how many people I've seen standing right where you are. I saw Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. That was a case of a whole band coming in here and play. Leanne Russell playing the piano, and, because it was a showcase. There was no bar out in front either when I first started coming here. And when they first opened the bar, it really changed the place quite a bit, because then it really drew a lot of people from movies and television who worked in movies and television, and they'd pour out of Damtana's, the restaurant next door, and they'd come in here, and it was just an extension. They were each an extension of the other. But so yeah, there was no bar. That's a funny story. People came here to drink, though. There's a famous story where John Lennon and Harry Nilsson and Keith Moon were sitting here. I'm sure you've heard this story, and the waitresses were these really great, really beautiful women who had, a lot of charm and a lot of character. They were just their own people, and they'd seen everybody come and go. They worked here all the time. They worked here all week while they get to know all the artists that came and played here every night. So John Lennon's sitting there with Harry Nilsson and Keith Moon, he's got a Kotex on his head. And the waitress is like, trying to take his order, and he says to the waitress, "Do you know who I am?" She says, "Yeah, you're an asshole with a Kotex on your head." Basically, those waitresses befriended most of the musicians here in a meaningful way, as friends, as people who cheered them on and were, supportive. I used to come here. Eventually they didn't make me sign up anymore. And the door to the kitchen, which was right here, women flying in and out with trays of food, serving people at tables here. eventually they just started, they would feed me. They'd ask me if I was hungry, and they would just feed me, and I was kind of like a denizen of this place. But the thing about the music scene that I come from, we weren't big stars. We played here because Doug Weston let us play here on Monday nights. I mean, I saw Glenn Frey and John David Southwood play here as a duo. You know, you might see, you might come here and see the show that was playing that week, but then also the scene on Monday was really important to us. But it's the bar out there, you know, didn't have pictures of famous people, and I don't know what was on the walls. Yeah, all right. Well, this is like a museum of memorabilia now. And I get it. I see why they do that. It's a great place to celebrate all the people that played this. And there's so much history. I guess I'd be disappointed if I came across the country to see the Troubadour and didn't have pictures of people who played here. But in the day, it was, there were tables, you know. I had a fight in here, you know. I wrote a song about it. But it's like, as a matter of fact, I was coming here for several years before I could drink, and there was one waitress who was my nemesis, and she was really trying to make, I didn't even want to drink. I didn't drink. I didn't care to drink. But she was pretty sure we were going to try to sneak a drink, and she was always on me. But basically, it was, what was important about this place was not the place or who played here. It was the musicians that populated it, the people who came here to hear music. It was a steady flow of musicians listening to each other, and it changed from that kind of place pretty quickly. Soon as, you know, I mean, soon as you got a gig here, you'd play one gig here, and Doug Weston would have an option for your next 6 gigs here. So your manager would have to cut him in on whatever you did next. Doug Weston, the owner of the Troubadour, was pretty shrewd, and he saw me waiting to play here for literally getting myself ready to play here. And when he did give me a gig, he signed me for 6 options. As soon as I played here, I could also play. Right after that, I could play the Music Center opening for Laura Nyro, and so he had an I mean, he'd wind up making deal to co-promote the other shows that artist would do. And actually, because of that is why they opened the Roxy. They opened the Roxy. It was a bunch of, it was Lou Adler and David Geffen and Elliot Roberts and people who had artists they wanted to play here, but they didn't want to have to deal with Doug Weston. What I'm saying, what changed about the place was, as soon as you played here, you couldn't come back here and do a show here because it's too small. The Eagles blew up, and then they were playing the Santa Monica Civic, or you were playing, you know, the Music Center, or you're playing the Shrine Auditorium. So this place changed a lot in the late 70s and 80s and became more of a rock club. And that's why you see some of these amazing artists on display here. Troubadour was a big deal. This is where the commercial folk acts play. This is where you had the Smothers Brothers or Hoyt Axton, and the traditional folk groups played at the Ash Grove. And everybody that went to the Troubadour went to the Ash Grove if somebody really great was playing. I mean, my dad took me to see Lightnin' Hopkins when I was 14 at the Ash Grove. And he loved to see Barbara Dane, and I mean, you know, all the people that I admired most as musicians really grew up going to the Ash Grove. David Lindley, Ry Cooder. Well, for me, looking around here, like I say, it doesn't look anything like the Troubadour bar I hung around in. So it's a little bit like seeing a museum. On the other hand, I've seen a lot of great shows since. I took part in a show here that was an amazing show put on by Mike Campbell of the Heartbreakers and Jonathan Wilson. And everybody plays, you know, very much like a Hoot Night, where everybody played 2 or 3 songs, and these just bands rolled on and off that stage. They had 2 drum kits, and you know, everybody played with each other. And those were in a way that was Jonathan and Mike's, you know, way of wanting to recreate what happened in the Troubadour. The only thing is that it never happened like that. It wasn't with bands, you know. Same with Laurel Canyon. People didn't have whole band setups in their living rooms in Laurel Canyon. So like I say, it didn't look like this, but you know, bars are notable because of the people who were in them. I remember standing here and seeing Al Cooper and Odetta at a table over there. I thought, oh my God, it's Al Cooper and talking to Odetta. And Al Cooper, of course, was the organist that played with Bob Dylan and was in the Blues Project. And he was a really major figure in rock and roll. And Odetta, who was like a really legendary singer from the folk era, you know. And of course they knew each other. That's when it dawned on me that everybody in New York knew everybody in New York. And here, everybody in LA knew everybody in LA.